There is a truth very few people dare to speak. Spiritual awakening is not a doorway into heaven's light, but a descent into the darkest corners of your own soul. Carl Jung called it the night sea journey, a voyage where one confronts unbearable solitude, the weight of anxiety, and the terrifying sense that you are losing your mind. And yet, it is precisely within that darkness that the door to truth slowly begins to open. Most of us have been taught to imagine awakening as a gentle rise toward bliss, like climbing a staircase toward peace, or floating upward into divine light. But awakening, in its raw form, is not about escaping human suffering. It is about dismantling every illusion we've built to survive. It is about letting the masks fall, even when those masks are the very skin we thought kept us alive. I know this sounds frightening, and it is. Imagine a river that has been dammed for years, its waters forced to flow in a controlled channel. The moment the dam breaks, the river doesn't trickle peacefully. It surges. It roars. It floods the land with everything that was once suppressed. Awakening is that flood. What we call breakdown is often not failure at all, but the natural eruption of what has been hidden for a lifetime. Jung discovered this truth by living it. At the height of his career, respected, admired, and successful, he chose to step deliberately into madness. For 6 years, he surrendered to visions so powerful they could have easily destroyed him. He wrote of being menaced by a psychosis. He saw images of death, rivers of blood, voices from unseen depths. His family thought he was lost. His colleagues abandoned him. And yet, from that descent came a map that can help us understand what is happening when our world seems to collapse from within. The shadow was the first territory on that map. Each of us carries a shadow, made up of everything we have repressed or disowned: our rage, or lust, our selfishness, even our wild joy. For years we bury these parts deep enough that we forget they exist, and we build a persona, a mask that looks kind, responsible, spiritual, intelligent. But the shadow always waits, and when awakening begins, the shadow does not dissolve. It erupts. Suddenly we are haunted by impulses we thought we had conquered, by urges we are ashamed of, by images that terrify us. This is the moment most people turn back. They pray harder, meditate longer, fast, more intensely, believing they must get rid of the darkness. But the shadow is not here to destroy us. It is here to complete us. Inside the darkness lives every spark of power, authenticity, and creativity we once pushed away. To reject the shadow is to reject half of our soul. Jung's practice of active imagination was his way through. He painted the violent images, wrote dialogues with his demons, gave voice to the forbidden figures of his unconscious, and in facing them, he discovered not evil, but the raw materials of creation itself. Yet even if you integrate the shadow, there is another trap waiting: the inflated spiritual ego. The moment we taste real spiritual experiences, visions, synchronicities, profound insights, the ego rushes in and claims them. It whispers, "I am chosen, I am special, I am awakened." This is more dangerous than ignorance, because now the ego disguises itself in sacred clothing. Many have fallen here. Prophets declaring themselves saviors, teachers building movements, seekers convinced they have transcended all human limits. But this is not awakening. This is the ego's last trick. Jung reminded us the ego is not meant to be killed, but to be relativized. It is a container, a vessel, a radio through which the divine signal flows. We are not the signal, we are the receiver. And then comes the void. Once the old identity crumbles and the ego is humbled, we find ourselves suspended in emptiness. No ground, no stable self, no certainty. It feels like free falling through an endless night sky. Most people panic and grab the first belief system that offers security. This is why so many fall into cults or rigid dogmas. After awakening, they cannot bear the silence of the void. Yet if we can breathe through that freefall, if we can allow ourselves to float in the unknown, the void becomes the womb of something new. The hardest challenge, however, is not the shadow, nor the ego, nor the void. The hardest challenge is returning to ordinary life. Imagine you have been to the depths of the ocean, touched treasures no one else has seen, and then come back to the shore. You try to share what you've found, but people look at you with suspicion. Your family says, "You've changed. I don't recognize you." Your friends joke, "Look who thinks they're enlightened now." The world does not welcome your awakening. It resists it, because your truth is a mirror, reflecting their illusions. And not everyone is ready to see themselves. This is why so many awakened souls either withdraw completely or collapse back into sleep. But Jung found another way. He practiced what he called selective participation, learning how to engage with the unconscious world in small doses, while also creating sacred spaces where consciousness could breathe freely. For him, it was a tower by the lake. For us, it might be a quiet room, a walk in nature, a community of like-hearted souls. Spiritual awakening, then, is not a single event, but a lifelong rhythm of death and rebirth. Every day, something false must die. Every day, something real is born. It is not the blissful paradise sold in the spiritual marketplace. It is not about escaping pain, but learning to sit in the fire of transformation without running. Jung himself, even in his 80s, was still discovering new shadows, still deflating new inflations, still being undone by the infinite depths of the unconscious. And this is the invitation for us to stop trying to survive awakening, and instead, allow it to unmake us. Because in every unmaking, a deeper self emerges. A self that is not more special or superior, but more whole, more human, more real. The privilege of a lifetime, Jung said, is to become who you truly are. And who you truly are is not just the light, not just the shadow, but the marriage of both. So if you are in the darkness now, if you feel like you are unraveling, remember this: you are not going crazy. You are going sane in a world that has normalized sleep. Don't rush to escape the night sea. Sail it. Trust that in the waves of your breaking lies the treasure of your becoming. 1. The shadow erupts. From the time we are children, we are taught which parts of ourselves are welcome in the daylight, and which parts must be locked away in the basement of our soul. A little boy is told not to cry because it makes him weak. A little girl is told not to be too loud because it makes her unfeminine. A teenager feels the surge of anger, désir, or jealousy, and is told to suppress it, hide it, deny it. Slowly, silently, we bury these raw, untamed parts of ourselves in a place Jung called the shadow. For years, we believe the shadow is gone, but it is not gone. It is waiting. And when the moment of awakening arrives, the shadow does not dissolve. It erupts. It erupts like a volcano that has been building pressure beneath the surface for decades. You feel it in sudden bursts of anger that don't make sense, in dreams filled with violent or forbidden images, in impulses that terrify you. You begin to wonder, am I becoming evil? Am I losing myself? But here is the truth: you are not becoming evil. You are becoming whole. The shadow is not your enemy. It is not a demon out to destroy you. It is the very part of you that has carried every ounce of strength, creativity, and authenticity you once rejected. What you thought was darkness is, in fact, the seed of your light. Imagine a forest that has been scorched by fire. On the surface, it looks like devastation ash, blackened earth, silence where life once thrived. Yet, beneath that soil, Dormant seeds are waiting. The fire is not the end. It is the necessary eruption that cracks the seed open. The shadow works in the same way. Its eruption feels like destruction, but it is actually the beginning of creation. When you were young, you may have learned that anger was dangerous. You pushed it away, telling yourself, "I must always be kind, always be peaceful." Yet in doing so, you may have also buried your capacity for healthy boundaries, for standing up for yourself, for saying no with strength. When the shadow erupts, that anger comes rushing back, not to harm you, but to return the power you once gave away. Perhaps you buried your desire. Sexual desire, desire for adventure, the desire for more life, because it felt unsafe or shameful. When awakening begins, those long-forgotten desires resurface. They shake you. They confuse you. They might even frighten you. But they are not here to corrupt you. They are here to remind you that your body, your passion, your hunger for life are sacred forces, not sins. This is where so many seekers stumble. They try to silence the shadow again. They meditate harder, pray longer, chant louder, hoping to drown out the voice of what they fear. But repression only feeds the shadow's hunger. The more you push it down, the stronger it will rise. Jung warned us about this very trap. He saw again and again how spiritual seekers mistook the eruption of the shadow for failure. They thought they were falling into darkness when, in truth, they were being invited into wholeness. To meet the shadow requires courage, but not the kind of courage that fights. It requires the courage to stay, to listen, to allow. This is where Jung's practice of active imagination becomes so powerful. Instead of running from the shadow, he sat with it. He painted the images that rose from his unconscious. He wrote dialogues with the figures that appeared in his dreams. He asked them questions. What do you want from me? What truth are you carrying that I have been too weak to hold? And what he discovered was extraordinary. Within the violence of his visions lived hidden wisdom. Within the figures that terrified him dwelled creativity, intuition, and insight. By engaging the shadow rather than repressing it, he transformed chaos into fuel for growth. You can do the same. When rage rises, instead of shoving it down, ask, what boundary have I allowed to be crossed? What power am I reclaiming when desire returns? Instead of shaming yourself, whisper, what vitality, what joy, what passion have I forgotten to honor? When fear overwhelms, lean close and ask, what part of me is longing to feel safe enough to live again? It is in these questions, not in denial, not in resistance, that transformation occurs. The shadow ceases to be a monster once you recognize it as your teacher. Think of it this way. The shadow is like a child who has been locked in the basement for years. It is hungry, angry, wild from neglect. When the door is finally opened, it rushes out, screaming, demanding attention. At first it may feel chaotic, even dangerous. But beneath that rage is the deepest longing of all: to be loved, to be accepted, to be brought back into the circle of your being. Awakening is the moment when you finally stop banishing that child and instead take it into your arms. Not to indulge its every whim, but to acknowledge its existence, to integrate its gifts, to weave its energy back into the tapestry of who you are. The paradox is this: the parts of yourself you most fear may become the very sources of your greatest strength. Your anger, once integrated, becomes clarity and courage. Your desire, once embraced, becomes creativity and vitality. Your fear, once honored, becomes wisdom and compassion. So when the shadow erupts in your awakening, do not panic. Do not believe you are broken. Do not mistake wholeness for corruption. This eruption is not the end of you, it is the beginning of you. And when you learn to walk with your shadow, not as an enemy, but as a guide, you will discover a new kind of freedom. The freedom of no longer needing to pretend. The freedom of no longer waging war with yourself. The freedom of finally being able to say, I am all of it. I am the light. I am the darkness. I am the river that rages and the calm that follows. This is not easy. It will shake you. It will strip away your illusions, but it will also return you to a truth deeper than peace, the truth of your wholeness. And that, dear friend, is the gift the shadow brings when it erupts. 2. The power of active imagination. When the shadow erupts, most people's first instinct is to run. We distract ourselves, numb ourselves, or try to cover the eruption with more rituals of light. But Jung discovered something radically different. He realized that what we fear most inside is not here to destroy us. It is here to be met, to be listened to be integrated, and his method for this was what he called active imagination. Now, active imagination is not about indulging fantasies or slipping into delusion. It is not about pretending to live in a different world. Instead, it is a conscious, intentional dialogue with the deeper parts of our own psyche. It is the art of opening a door to the images, voices, and feelings that rise from within, and then meeting them as if they were real. Because in the language of the psyche, they are. Think of it like this. When we dream at night, our unconscious mind tells stories. Those dreams can be terrifying or beautiful, chaotic or profound. Most of us wake up and dismiss them as nonsense. Jung did the opposite. He leaned in. He asked, what if these dreams are not meaningless? What if they are messengers carrying truths I have been too blind to see in waking life? But he didn't stop with dreams. He began practicing in waking life what he had done in sleep. He would sit quietly, allow an image to rise, perhaps a figure, perhaps a scene, and instead of dismissing it, he engaged it. He would ask, who are you? Why are you here? What do you want to show me? He would write their words, paint their faces, and speak with them as one speaks to a friend. This may sound strange to the logical mind. To talk with an image in your own head, to write letters to the parts of yourself you've denied. But this is not madness. This is a bridge. Active imagination is a bridge between the conscious mind and the unconscious depths, between the self you think you are and the vast ocean of self you have yet to meet. When Jung practiced this, he encountered terrifying figures, images of murder, chaos, destruction. He didn't push them away. He painted them. He dialogued with them. And through this process, he found something astonishing. Beneath the violence lived creativity. Beneath the chaos lived insight. The very images that threatened to undo him became the guides that rebuilt him. I remember once speaking with a man who had suppressed his anger his entire life. He thought of himself as gentle, always agreeable, never confrontational. But inside, his shadow carried decades of unexpressed rage. When awakening came, the rage began to seep into his dreams. He saw himself striking people he loved, setting fire to homes, breaking everything he touched. He came to me in terror, convinced he was losing his soul. But when he began practicing active imagination, something shifted. He sat with the image of himself raging. He asked it, why are you here? What truth are you carrying for me? Slowly, the image responded, not in words spoken aloud, but in feelings, in symbols. And he realized the rage was not here to destroy him. It was here to return his boundaries, to remind him that saying no is not violence, that standing tall is not cruelty, that claiming his power is not sin. Through active imagination, he reclaimed his strength, and what once appeared as monstrous rage transformed into a steady, grounded presence. He no longer feared himself. He began to trust the wholeness of who he was. This is the gift of active imagination. It allows us to face the figures within us that we have feared or denied, not with repression, but with curiosity and dialogue. It transforms the battlefield of the psyche into a meeting ground where even the darkest forces are seen, honored, and integrated. And here is the simple, profound truth. The unconscious will not leave you alone until you listen. It will knock through dreams, through symptoms, through eruptions of emotion. The more you resist, the louder it becomes. Active imagination is a way of saying, I am listening now. I am willing to hear what you have to say. And in that listening, healing begins. Let me offer an image. Imagine a village at night. Outside the gates, in the forest, lives a creature the villagers fear. They call it a demon. They build walls higher, light torches brighter, but the creature only circles closer. One day, someone dares to step outside the gate and sit quietly at the forest's edge. And there, face to face, they see that the creature is not a demon at all, but a neglected ally wild. Yes, but carrying gifts the village desperately needs. That is what active imagination does. It opens the gate and meets the creature. It transforms fear into relationship. When you practice this, you may discover figures that surprise you. A wise old man who whispers truths you never dared to believe. A child who reminds you of your forgotten joy. Even a monster who, once heard, lays down its claws and reveals itself as your strength. Each figure is a fragment of you, waiting to be reintegrated. Active imagination is not about losing yourself in fantasy. It is about expanding yourself into fullness. It is about bringing back the lost voices of your soul and allowing them to sit at the same table as your conscious self. It is about learning that every voice, even the frightening ones, carries part of your wholeness. And here is what makes this practice so powerful. It is not passive. It requires your full participation. You do not just watch the movie of your unconscious, you step into it. You ask questions. You answer. You paint. You write. You embody. You create a dialogue with your own depths. And in doing so, you awaken creativity, insight, and energy that were once buried. The rational world may dismiss this as imagination. But remember, the word imagination comes from the root imago, meaning image. And images are the language of the soul. To imagine is to converse with the very fabric of your psyche. It is not illusion, it is revelation. So if you find yourself haunted by dreams, by inner images, by emotions you cannot explain, do not run. Sit with them. Listen. Write to them. Ask them what they carry. Allow the dialogue to unfold. You may be astonished at what emerges, because in truth, the monsters of your unconscious are not here to kill you. They are here to give you back the parts of yourself you abandoned long ago. And when you open the door through active imagination, you discover that what you feared most may, in fact, be the very medicine your soul has been longing for. 3. The spiritual ego, more subtle than the ordinary self. There is a moment on the path of awakening that feels intoxicating. After years of struggle, after the eruption of the shadow and the painful nights of doubt, you finally taste something luminous. Maybe it's a vision during meditation. Maybe it's a synchronicity so precise that it leaves you breathless. Maybe it's the sense of merging with something larger than yourself. A field of love or light that feels infinite. When this happens, the ordinary ego, so used to claiming achievements, rushes in. It whispers, I have seen what others have not. I have touched the truth. I am chosen. And before you realize it, you begin to build a new identity. One that looks far more spiritual, far more enlightened, but in essence is just the old ego wearing a more radiant costume. This is what Jung warned us about. He called it inflation. It is when the ego identifies with spiritual content, visions, insights, energies, and claims them as its own. It's like a small cup believing it has become the ocean just because it momentarily touched the waves. The spiritual ego is more subtle and more dangerous than the ordinary ego. Why? Because the ordinary ego might boast about money, status, or intelligence, and eventually, you recognize its vanity. But the spiritual ego boasts about visions, purity, enlightenment. It cloaks itself in humility, while quietly feeding on superiority. It says, I am awakened, and they are not. I have transcended, while others are still asleep. And in this belief, the spiritual ego separates you from the very unity awakening was meant to reveal. I once met a man who had profound mystical experiences. He told me of nights when he felt as though he dissolved into light, of mornings where every bird song seemed like a direct message from God. These were real experiences. I could see the sincerity in his eyes. But as he spoke, I also noticed something else. He began to compare. He said, most people don't understand what I know. Most people are still lost. Without realizing it, his ego had claimed ownership of the divine. The gift had turned into a weapon of separation. The tragedy of the spiritual ego is that it feels so convincing, you don't think you are being arrogant. You think you are being faithful to your awakening. Yet, slowly, you begin to believe that the messenger is the message. You forget that the vision, the synchronicity, the opening, flowed through you, not from you. The radio starts thinking it is the music. Here is where gentle honesty becomes vital. Every time you feel the temptation to say, I have arrived, pause. Every time you feel certain that you hold the truth while others are blind, pause. Every time you are filled with a sense of being chosen, special, superior, pause. And in that pause, ask, whose voice is this? What part of me is speaking? Most often, it is not the soul. It is the ego putting on a sacred robe. But this doesn't mean the ego must be destroyed. Many teachers speak of ego death, as though enlightenment comes from annihilating the self completely. Jung saw this differently. He realized the ego is not the enemy. The ego is a container. It is the vessel that allows divine content to move through us without flooding us completely. Without the ego, we lose the ability to function. We can't live, work, or even communicate. The goal is not to kill the ego, but to humble it, to place it in its rightful position. Not master, but servant, not source, but channel. Think of the ego as a cup. If you smash the cup, you can't hold the water. But if you expand the cup, clean it, keep it in proportion, it can carry the living water of the spirit without spilling it everywhere. That is what integration looks like. Jung encouraged what he called relativizing the ego. It means learning to see the ego in context, to recognize it as one part of a much larger whole. The ego remains, but it is no longer inflated. It becomes transparent, flexible, a vessel rather than an idol. In practical life, this looks simple. When you have a vision, you honor it without claiming it. When synchronicities happen, you allow them to guide you without making them proof of your superiority. When you feel an energy move through you, you bow to the source of that energy, knowing you are the channel, not the origin. You begin to live with gratitude instead of grandiosity. The difference is subtle but profound. The spiritual ego says, I have awakened, therefore I am above others. The humble, integrated self says, awakening has touched me. Therefore, I am more responsible to live with compassion among others. The spiritual ego divides, the integrated self unites. If you find yourself caught in the trap of the spiritual ego, do not condemn yourself. Condemnation is just another mask of the ego. Instead, smile gently at it. Recognize its fear. Understand that the ego inflates itself precisely because it feels insecure. It clings to superiority because it is terrified of insignificance. When you see this clearly, you can bring tenderness to your own ego. You can say, thank you for trying to protect me. But you are not in charge anymore. You can rest now. And something beautiful happens when the ego learns its rightful place. Instead of being a wall that blocks divine flow, it becomes a window that lets the light through. Instead of being a general shouting commands, it becomes a servant carrying water. Instead of being a false crown, it becomes an empty vessel. Awakening, then, is not about becoming special. It is about becoming real. The true awakened soul does not need to claim superiority, because they no longer live from comparison. They know they are both ordinary and divine at once, just like everyone else. This is why the trap of the spiritual ego is such an important stage of the journey. It humbles us. It teaches us that the greatest danger is not in being asleep, but in thinking we are awake while the ego is secretly in control. The only cure is constant awareness, gentle humility, and the willingness to keep asking, what part of me is speaking now? If you can hold this question close to your heart, you will discover something liberating. You don't have to be special to be whole. You don't have to be chosen to be loved. You don't have to rise above humanity to touch the divine. In fact, the more fully you embrace your humanity with all its flaws, its ordinariness, its simplicity, the more room the divine has to flow through you without obstruction. And that, dear friend, is the secret the spiritual ego never wants you to know. 4. The void. Free fall into the unknown. There comes a moment in the journey of awakening when the old self has dissolved, but the new self has not yet emerged. It is a space of suspension, of emptiness, of silence, so deep it can feel unbearable. Jung called this stage the void. The void arrives after the masks of the ego begin to crumble. You no longer fit into your old identity, but you haven't yet grown into something new. The ground beneath you has disappeared, and you find yourself in a kind of free fall. It feels like drifting in a vast night sky without stars, like floating in deep water with no shore in sight. This stage is frightening. Many people panic when they touch it. The human mind is wired to cling to certainty, to structures, to familiar ground. And so, when the void opens, the temptation is immediate. Grab the nearest belief system. Cling to the closest dogma. Join the first teacher or group that promises stability. Anything to stop the sensation of falling. But here is the paradox. The void is not here to punish you. It is here to cleanse you. It is not a mistake on the path. It is the path. Think of a caterpillar that has spun its cocoon. Inside, the caterpillar does not simply grow wings while remaining whole. No, it dissolves entirely into a formless soup. Every part of its old identity breaks down. If you were to look inside the cocoon, you would see no caterpillar at all. Just liquid, shapeless, undefined. And yet, hidden in that dissolution are the imaginal cells, the blueprints for the butterfly to come. The void is our cocoon. When the ego dies back, we too dissolve into a kind of formlessness. The self we thought we knew disappears, and all that remains is emptiness. It is terrifying, yes, but it is also sacred. It is the womb of rebirth. I remember a woman who came to me during such a stage. She had lost all her old anchors. The career that once defined her no longer made sense. The relationships that had given her identity felt shallow. Even her spiritual practices, once full of meaning, now seemed hollow. She said to me, "I feel like I am nothing, like I don't exist." Tears streamed down her face as she confessed that she wanted to run, to fill the emptiness with something, anything. But I told her, stay in the nothing. Breathe with the emptiness. Let the silence hold you. And slowly, over weeks and months, she began to notice something. Within the silence, a deeper presence stirred. Within the emptiness, a quiet strength emerged. She realized she had not been erased. She had been emptied, so something more authentic could arrive. The void teaches us a truth. Our culture resists. Rebirth requires death. Transformation requiert dissolution. There is no skipping this stage. You cannot become new while clinging to the old. Most spiritual seekers struggle here because the void cannot be controlled. You cannot think your way out of it. You cannot rush it with effort or bypass it with positive affirmations. The void demands surrender. It asks you to stop doing, stop fixing, stop striving, and instead, rest in the not knowing. This is why many traditions speak of the dark night of the soul. It is not about sin or punishment. It is about being stripped of every illusion until you stand bare before the mystery. And in that nakedness, you learn trust. Not trust in an outcome, but trust in the process itself. The mind will protest. It will scream, "I am lost, I am dying. Something is wrong." But in truth, nothing is wrong. What is dying is not you, but the false layers of you. The one who is falling is the mask. The one who is panicking is the ego. Beneath it all, the deeper self remains, patient and eternal. In physics, there is a principle called the vacuum state. Empty space is not truly empty. It is alive with potential, teeming with virtual particles that appear and disappear in an endless dance. The void of awakening is like this. It feels empty, but it is alive with potential. It is a fertile silence, a creative nothingness. Within it, the seeds of your truest self are quietly germinating. If you find yourself in the void, do not rush to escape. Breathe, rest, allow. It may feel like dying, but it is the most natural kind of death, the death of what no longer serves you. It may feel like floating without direction, but trust that the current of life is carrying you toward a new shore. You may not see the butterfly yet, but it is already forming. You may not feel the ground yet, but roots are quietly growing in the dark. The void is not the absence of life. It is the womb of new life. When you stop fighting the void, something unexpected happens. The panic softens. The emptiness begins to feel spacious rather than suffocating. You start to notice the stillness as supportive, like a vast hand holding you. You realize that you are not falling into nothing, you are falling into being itself. This stage cannot be rushed. Just as the cocoon takes its time, so too does your soul. Every day in the void teaches you patience, humility, and the art of surrender. And when the time is right, without forcing, without striving, a new self will emerge. Not a persona, not a mask, not another role to play, but a deeper authenticity. The gift of the void is simple but profound. It strips you of every false ground, so that when you finally stand again, you stand on truth. It empties you of every borrowed belief, so that when you finally believe again, it is from the marrow of your own being. It dissolves you so that you can finally be whole. So if you are there now, in the emptiness, the silence, the unknowing, take heart. You are not lost. You are being remade. You are not abandoned. You are being held in the womb of transformation. The void is not your enemy. It is your passage. 5. The pain of returning to ordinary life. One of the most difficult moments in the journey of awakening does not come during the visions, the darkness, or even the terrifying void. It comes when you return to the ordinary world. After you have touched something vast and real within yourself, you step back into familiar rooms, sit at familiar tables, speak with familiar faces, and suddenly, everything feels foreign. The life you once lived no longer fits. The conversations that once amused you now feel shallow. The roles you used to play dutiful son, caring friend, hard-working professional, now feel like costumes from another lifetime. It's not that you are trying to be different, it's that you are different. Something inside you has shifted, and it vibrates at a frequency that no longer matches the world around you. This mismatch is painful. It is not the dramatic pain of catastrophe. It is quieter, subtler, like the sound of nails on a chalkboard, a constant friction between your inner truth and the expectations of the outside world. You may notice it first with family. A spouse who looks at you with suspicion. You've changed. I don't recognize you anymore. Children who grow clingy because they sense the shift in your energy. Parents who ask, "Are you sure you're okay? You seem different." None of this is malicious. They are not plotting against you. But unconsciously, they feel the dissonance. Your awakening unsettles their equilibrium because your transformation threatens the masks they still wear. Friends, too, may withdraw or joke to hide their discomfort. You might hear remarks like, "Look who thinks they're enlightened now," or, "You're too serious these days." They want the old you, the predictable one who played by the old rules, not the you who now sees through the games they still play. This is the silent war Jung described, the clash between the newly awakened frequency and the collective field of the unawakened. The awakened soul mirrors back what others are unwilling to face. Your authenticity exposes their pretense. Your depth unsettles their surface. And often, the reaction is resistance, ridicule, or withdrawal. At first, you might feel anger. Why can't they support me? Why can't they be happy I'm growing? But with time, you realize it is not personal. They are not rejecting you. They are rejecting the reflection of themselves they see in you. The pain of returning to ordinary life lies in this paradox. If you stay true to your awakening, you risk losing connection with those you love. If you shrink back into your old self to keep the peace, you risk losing yourself. Many people cannot hold this tension. They either abandon their awakening to belong again, or they abandon everyone and become spiritual exiles. But there is another way, though it is not easy. It is to learn what Jung called selective participation. This means you learn to engage with the world in measured doses. You attend the family dinner, but afterward you retreat into solitude to recover. You join the conversation, but you no longer betray yourself by pretending to agree with what feels false. You learn to walk in two worlds, fully awake, and yet compassionately present with those who are not. I once knew a woman who had gone through a profound awakening. She returned to her family full of light, eager to share her discoveries. But every attempt to explain was met with resistance. Her husband grew anxious. Her children demanded more attention. Her friends dismissed her. For months she felt torn. Should she hide her truth or risk being alone? Slowly, she learned balance. She stopped trying to convince them. She stopped trying to prove her awakening. Instead, she embodied it quietly. She smiled more, listened more deeply, carried a steady presence into the room. She no longer spoke about awakening. She lived it. And little by little, the resistance around her softened. Some relationships healed, others drifted away, but she remained anchored in herself. This is the work of the awakened in ordinary life, not to preach, not to convert, but to embody, to live in such a way that others can feel the difference without needing you to explain it, to be a quiet lighthouse rather than a noisy alarm. Still, the loneliness is real. To walk among those who do not understand you, to feel the sting of being seen as strange or unstable, it hurts. And yet, this loneliness is part of the purification. It teaches you that awakening is not about recognition or validation. It is about fidelity to your truth, even when the world does not applaud. In physics, when two frequencies meet, they either harmonize or clash. If one is much stronger, the weaker frequency eventually adjusts. Your awakening is a new vibration. At first, it clashes with the old world, but if you remain steady, not aggressive, not defensive, simply steady, the field around you begins to shift. Some will rise to meet you, others will fall away, and both outcomes are grace. Returning to ordinary life after awakening is not about fitting back into the old world. It is about learning to stand as yourself in the midst of it, to eat at the same table, walk the same streets, Share the same conversations, but from a place of inner truth rather than unconscious habit. It is about becoming a bridge between worlds, not by explaining, but by embodying. The pain of returning is real, but it is also sacred. It strips away the need for approval. It deepens your compassion for those still asleep. It teaches you patience, humility, and the art of quiet strength. So, if you find yourself back in the ordinary world, feeling misunderstood, doubted, or mocked, take heart. You are not failing. You are living the hardest and most necessary part of the journey. Hold your frequency steady. Let your life, not your words, reveal your transformation. Because in the end, awakening is not proven by visions or voices. It is proven in the way you return to the ordinary world and live with extraordinary presence. 6. Awakening is not an event but an endless process. One of the most common questions people ask when they first step onto the path of awakening is this: when will it end? When will I finally be awakened? Fully healed, completely free. It is a longing we all understand, the desire for a finish line. A final rival. A place where the storms quiet and the struggles cease. Carl Jung's answer to this question was both devastating and liberating. He said, "Never. Awakening is not a destination, not a single peak to conquer. It is not an event that happens once and then leaves you forever changed in a permanent state of bliss. Awakening is a spiral. It is infinite. Every day something false dies, and every day something more real is born. Every week another mask falls away, and every month another layer of shadow emerges to be integrated. This truth can be unsettling at first. We want certainty. We want to believe that once we cross a line, the pain will vanish and life will become easy. But the deeper reality is both simpler and more profound. Awakening is life itself, in its rawest form, and life is not a straight road. It is a constant rhythm of endings and beginnings, of death and rebirth, of breaking and healing. Think of the seasons. Winter does not happen once. It returns again and again. Spring does not bloom once. It comes back each year with new flowers. In the same way, awakening is seasonal. There are times of darkness and descent, times of growth and blossoming, times of harvest and celebration, and times of loss. To awaken is not to escape this cycle, but to live it consciously. Jung himself never stopped awakening. Even in his 80s, he was still discovering new shadows, still humbling new inflations of the ego, still surrendering to deeper layers of the unconscious. He once dreamed, near the end of his life, that he was a student again, ignorant, seeking, beginning anew. After decades of profound insight and contribution, his psyche reminded him, "You know nothing." This is the paradox of awakening. The more you awaken, the more you realize how infinite the unconscious truly is. You are not climbing a mountain toward the top. You are descending into an ocean without end. And yet, this is not despairing. It is freeing, because when you release the need to arrive, you discover the beauty of the journey itself. Many people resist this. They cling to the idea of completion. When will I be done with shadow work? When will my wounds finally disappear? When will I stop dying and start living? But the answer is there is no end point. You do not stop dying, but you also do not stop being reborn. You do not stop breaking, but you also do not stop healing. Life is not something to be finished. It is something to be lived. To accept this is to fall in love with dying, not morbidly, but consciously. Every death becomes a birth. Every ending, a doorway to beginning. Every collapse, an invitation to wholeness. When you see this, you stop fearing the spiral. You begin to move with it. Like a dancer who has learned the rhythm of a song. In physics, energy never disappears. It only changes form. In the same way, awakening is the constant transformation of who you think you are into who you are becoming. The old identity falls away. But its energy is not lost. It is reborn in a new form. A truer self. I once knew a man who, after years of inner work, said to me, "I thought I was done. I thought I had finally healed everything." And then, suddenly, another wave, came another shadow, another layer of grief. I felt like I had failed. But the truth is, he had not failed. He was simply entering the next turn of the spiral. He was meeting a deeper part of himself, one that had waited patiently for him to be ready. This is the nature of the path. It will never stop asking you to surrender. It will never stop asking you to shed what is false. But in exchange, it will never stop giving you new life. So, when you find yourself asking, "When will it end?" pause. Breathe. Realize that the very question comes from the ego's desire for control. The ego wants a destination. The soul knows there is none. The soul is not trying to arrive. The soul is trying to become. If you can release the need for completion, a quiet joy emerges. You begin to see beauty even in the breaking. You begin to trust the wisdom of endings. You stop rushing through winter and start noticing the stillness it brings. You stop clinging to summer and start appreciating its passing. Each phase becomes sacred because you no longer demand that it last forever. Awakening, then, is not about reaching a state of permanent bliss. It is about living in conscious relationship with the endless unfolding of life. It is about dying with awareness, being reborn with awareness, grieving with awareness, rejoicing with awareness. And the gift of this endless process is humility. You stop thinking of yourself as enlightened or complete. You begin to see yourself as a student forever, always learning, always beginning, always humbled by the mystery. The question is not, "When will I be fully awakened?" The question is, "Am I willing to keep awakening?" Again and again, for the rest of my life. Because the spiral never ends. But neither does the beauty. 7. Time and patience as medicine. In a world that celebrates speed and instant results, it is difficult to accept that the deepest transformations unfold slowly. Yet on the path of awakening, there are no shortcuts, no quick fixes, no instant enlightenment. The soul does not bloom according to our calendars or our deadlines. It blooms according to the rhythm of eternity. When we face a spiritual crisis, what Jung called a descent into the unconscious, our first instinct is often urgency. We want to fix it, solve it, end it. We tell ourselves, "If I just meditate more, pray harder, read enough books, maybe I can get through this faster." But awakening is not something we push through. It is something we surrender to. Think of a seed planted in the earth. For weeks, perhaps months, nothing appears on the surface, beneath the soil. However, the seed is swelling, splitting, sending out tiny roots into the dark. If you grew impatient and dug it up to check on its progress, you would destroy the very life you were hoping to accelerate. In the same way, your soul requires both darkness and time. The roots must grow before the stem can rise. The inner foundation must deepen before the outer transformation can hold. Patience, then, is not passive. It is active trust. It is the quiet strength to let the process unfold in its own way. It is the willingness to stay present even when nothing seems to be happening. I remember sitting once with a man who had gone through a profound awakening experience. For a few weeks, his world seemed radiant, colors brighter, synchronicities everywhere, a sense of lightness he had never felt before. But then, as so often happens, the shadow returned. Old patterns resurfaced. He felt confused, abandoned by the very light that had lifted him. "Why am I back here?" he asked me. "Did I do something wrong? Did I lose the awakening?" I told him gently, "No, you are not back where you started. You are simply in the next season of your journey. Just as spring leads to summer, and summer to autumn. Awakening, too, has cycles. Trust the cycle. Let it carry you. Don't demand endless spring. Allow the winter, because within it, unseen, the next spring is preparing. This is the medicine of patience. It reminds us that growth is not linear. It comes in waves, in spirals, in rhythms we cannot control. The oak tree does not rush its acorns. The river does not hurry its flow to the sea. Why should we imagine the soul must be quicker than nature? Time itself is a healer. Think of grief. In the early days of loss, the pain feels unbearable, constant, rough. But as weeks pass, something shifts. The grief does not vanish, but it softens. The sharp edges round themselves into a quieter ache. You begin to breathe again, to laugh again, not because you forced yourself, but because time itself has worked a kind of alchemy. The same is true of awakening. The storms will calm, not because you fought them into submission, but because life itself carries you forward. Patience also protects us from illusion. In the rush to feel complete, many people grasp at false certainties. They adopt rigid beliefs, join strict communities, or cling to teachers who promise quick results. But these are like scaffolding built on sand. They may feel secure for a moment, but they collapse when life tests them. True transformation cannot be rushed, because it requires depth. And depth requires time. In the language of the body, patience feels like exhaling. It feels like loosening the grip on what should be happening and allowing what is happening to simply be. In the language of the soul, patience feels like humility. It says, I am not in charge of this process. Something larger is at work within me, and my task is not to control it, but to trust it. Jung often emphasized that the unconscious is infinite. To explore it is to explore without end. This is why awakening cannot be completed, only lived. And to live it well, we must carry patience as our constant companion. Without patience, every descent feels like failure. With patience, every descent is seen as another turn in the spiral, another deepening of the soul. There is also healing in time itself. Sometimes we don't notice it until we look back. Think of moments in your life that once felt unbearable heartbreak, failure, humiliation. At the time, they seemed endless. And yet, here you are. Time carried you through. Life continued. You emerged, changed, perhaps scarred, but also wiser, deeper, more compassionate. Awakening is no different. The storms pass. The night gives way to dawn. Time does its quiet work, shaping you into someone you could not yet imagine. To walk this path with patience is to treat yourself with tenderness. When you fall back into old patterns, patience whispers, this, too, is part of the journey. When you feel lost in the void, patience reminds you the seed is still alive beneath the soil. When you ache for arrival, patience reassures you there is no need to rush. Life is not a race to the finish. Life is the unfolding itself. And so the medicine of time and patience heals not by taking away the struggle, but by teaching you how to rest inside it. It teaches you to soften your grip, to allow the river to carry you, to trust that every season has its place. No shortcut can replace this. No effort can bypass it. Just as the heart takes time to heal after a wound, the soul takes time to heal after its illusions are shattered. And that time is sacred. It is not wasted. It is the very ground upon which new life grows. So if you find yourself restless, impatient, longing for the journey to be over, pause. Breathe. Place your hand on your chest and remind yourself, I am not late. I am not behind. I am exactly where I need to be. Because awakening is not about speed. It is about depth, and depth requires time. Patience is not weakness. It is the greatest strength. It is the wisdom to know that life is unfolding exactly as it must, and that your only task is to remain present, open, and willing to let it. 8. Frequency and vibration. The energy that reshapes reality. One of the most profound shifts that occurs during awakening is invisible to the eye, yet unmistakable to the heart. Your vibration changes. Your energy begins to resonate at a different frequency, and the world around you responds. Some connections deepen with ease. Others fall away with pain. This is not imagination. It is resonance, the subtle but powerful law that governs both physics and the human soul. In quantum science, every particle vibrates. Nothing is truly still. The chair you sit on, the body you inhabit, the thoughts you think, all are patterns of vibration. And just as two musical notes can either harmonize or clash, so too do human beings. When you awaken, your vibration shifts upward, becoming clearer, more attuned to truth. And when this new frequency meets the old frequencies of unconsciousness, the dissonance is felt as real pain. It is the reason why sitting in a room full of surface-level conversations can feel suffocating, why being around people who remain asleep to themselves can feel like scratching chalk across your nerves. You are not imagining it. It is the clash of frequencies, the meeting of vibrations that no longer align. I remember a time in my own life when this dissonance felt almost unbearable. After a deep awakening, I went to dinner with old friends. They laughed about things we used to enjoy, joked about the same topics we always had. Outwardly, nothing had changed. Yet inside, I felt a gnawing ache. Every sentence carried a weight of falseness I could not ignore. Every laugh seemed like an echo of a world I no longer belonged to. By the end of the night, my body was tense, my chest tight. I left not out of judgment, but out of necessity. My energy could not survive there any longer. This is why awakened souls often withdraw, not because they believe they are superior, but because their new frequency makes unconscious environments unbearable. Jung himself experienced this. He wrote of sitting at gatherings where he could see every unspoken shadow at play, hidden resentments, unacknowledged desires, projections bouncing like invisible arrows between people. He said it felt like torture to remain silent, watching what others could not see. But withdrawal does not have to mean exile. The key is creating what Jung called sacred space, places where your new vibration can breathe without being suffocated. For him, it was a stone tower by the lake. For you, it may be a quiet room in your home, a stretch of forest, or a circle of kindred souls who meet you where you are. These spaces are not luxuries, they are necessities. They are the medicine that helps you stabilize your frequency in a world that has not yet shifted. Think of a musical instrument. After being played in harsh weather, it must be tuned again. If left untuned, it produces discord. You are no different. Each time you step into the world of unconsciousness, your energy wavers. Sacred space is where you retune, where you remember your true note. Yet the pain of frequency dissonance is not without purpose. It teaches you discernment. It shows you where you belong and where you do not. It forces you to honor your own energy rather than betraying it for belonging. And slowly, it refines your life. Some relationships fall away, but the ones that remain grow deeper, anchored in authenticity rather than convenience. In time, you begin to notice something else. Your frequency is not only sensitive, it is creative. It does not just react to the world, it shapes the world. Science reminds us that observation itself alters reality at the quantum level. In the same way, the vibration you carry alters the reality you experience. When you are rooted in fear, you resonate with fear and attract its reflections. When you are rooted in love, you resonate with love and invite its presence. This does not mean you can control everything with positive thinking. That is another trap of the ego. What it means is that your state of being matters. The frequency you embody is the foundation upon which your life unfolds. I once met a woman who had struggled for years with toxic relationships. After her awakening, she began to take her energy seriously. She stopped entering spaces that drained her. She stopped giving her attention to people who disrespected her boundaries. Instead, she cultivated stillness, gratitude, and self-trust. Within a year, her entire circle had changed. She did not force it. She did not push people away in anger. She simply allowed her new frequency to lead, and life rearranged itself around her. This is the quiet power of vibration. It is not dramatic. It does not shout. It hums. It radiates. It reshapes reality through resonance. Still, you must be gentle with yourself. Living at a new frequency in an old world is exhausting. You will need solitude. You will need silence. You will need to step away from noise and chaos, not to escape, but to recharge. Like a lamp plugged into a fragile socket, you cannot stay lit without returning to your source. So create your sacred spaces. Guard them as you would guard your own heart. Fill them with music that heals, words that nourish, people who see you. Step into them whenever the clash of the world grows too loud. Over time, something remarkable happens. You learn not only to protect your frequency, but to carry it with you. You learn to walk into a room without being overwhelmed, because your presence itself begins to shape the room. You learn to speak without forcing, and yet your words ripple out, softening the field around you. You learn that you do not have to preach, convince, or argue. You only have to embody. Your vibration does the rest. And perhaps this is the deepest truth. Reality itself is vibration. To awaken is not to escape vibration, but to participate in it consciously, to become aware that your very being is a note in the great symphony of existence, to realize that when you live aligned with truth, you are not only healed, you become a healing presence for the world around you. So when you feel the pain of dissonance, do not despair. It means your note has changed. It means you are no longer in tune with illusion. It means you are vibrating with a deeper reality. Trust that, honor it, and let your life become the instrument through which that new frequency can be heard. 9. Holding the tension of opposites. Living fully awake and fully human. One of the deepest lessons of awakening is that it is not about choosing one side of life over the other. It is not about clinging to light and rejecting darkness, nor about abandoning the ordinary world in favor of the spiritual. True awakening invites us into a far more difficult, but far more beautiful path holding both. Jung called this the ability to hold the tension of opposites. It is the art of standing in the middle of life's paradoxes without trying to resolve them too quickly. It is the practice of embracing contradictions, joy and sorrow, strength and fragility, clarity and confusion, and discovering that wholeness is found not in choosing one over the other, but in containing both. When you first awaken, there is a temptation to split. You feel drawn to the light and want to push away anything that feels heavy or dark. You long for the spiritual and want to distance yourself from the material, but life does not allow such neat divisions. If you try to cling to only one side, you end up unbalanced. To deny darkness is to deny half of your own soul. To deny the ordinary is to deny half of your own humanity. I once spoke with a man who, after a profound awakening, tried to live only in the light. He meditated for hours, fasted, avoided anything he considered worldly. At first, he felt elevated, but slowly, his relationships crumbled, his health declined, and his shadow returned with more force than ever. He had mistaken transcendence for wholeness. Only when he began to integrate, allowing himself to work, to laugh, to love, to embrace his body, did he discover true balance. This is the paradox of the awakened life. You are called to be both fully human and fully divine, both ordinary and extraordinary. You are invited to wash the dishes with the same presence you bring to meditation, to feel grief in the same heart that holds gratitude, to walk in the marketplace with the same awareness you carry in the temple. Holding the tension of opposites does not mean living without discernment. It means you stop fleeing from contradiction. It means you can sit with discomfort without rushing to resolve it. You can feel fear and courage at the same time. You can experience doubt and faith in the same breath. You can cry deeply while knowing that joy has not left you. In the natural world, we see this everywhere. The sun does not erase the night. It alternates with it. The ocean is not only calm, it also storms. A tree does not grow only upward. It also sinks roots downward. Life itself is a dance of opposites, and wholeness is found in their rhythm. So too with us. The awakened person is not someone who has eradicated darkness, but someone who has made peace with it. They are not someone who floats above the ordinary, but someone who can kneel in the mud and still see the sacred. When you learn to hold the tension, something remarkable happens. You stop living in extremes. You stop swinging between denial and indulgence, between asceticism and indulgence. Instead, you discover a quiet middle space, not lukewarm compromise, but a living paradox. You become both strong and soft, both grounded and open, both finite and infinite. Jung described this as the transcendent function, the capacity of the psyche to bring opposites together without collapsing into one or the other. It is not about finding a neat solution, but about allowing the pressure of contradiction to reshape you into something larger. Think of iron in the forge. It is heated, hammered, cooled, and heated again. Each time, it is stretched between extremes, fire and water, expansion and contraction. And through this tension, it becomes strong, unbreakable, and whole. So too does the soul. In my own journey, the hardest paradox to hold was this: I am both deeply flawed and profoundly whole. For years, I thought I had to choose. Either I was enlightened and therefore perfect, or I was broken and therefore unworthy. But awakening showed me the truth. I am both. My flaws are real. My shadows are alive. And yet, my essence is untouched, radiant, and whole. To live in this paradox is to live with humility and grace. The same is true of our place in the world. We are both ordinary humans, working, eating, paying bills, and infinite souls, connected to the mystery of existence. To deny either is to fragment ourselves, but to embrace both is to discover freedom. This is not easy. The ego wants certainty, clarity, simplicity. It wants to declare, I am this, not that, but life whispers you are both. And so, the task is to stay in the discomfort of contradiction long enough to discover the deeper wholeness it reveals. In practice, this might look like allowing yourself to grieve a loss, while also noticing the love that still surrounds you. It might look like feeling anger towards someone you care about, while still honoring the love that remains beneath the anger. It might look like embracing your hunger for transcendence, while still honoring your body's need for food, rest, and touch. To hold opposites is to live with integrity. It means you no longer betray one part of yourself for the sake of another. You no longer pretend to be only light while secretly consumed by shadow. You no longer pretend to be only spiritual while quietly ashamed of being human. You learn to say, I am both. And that is enough. When you live this way, something extraordinary happens. You become whole. You become trustworthy not because you are flawless, but because you are real. Others feel it. They sense the depth in you, the groundedness, the lack of pretense. You are not trying to be perfect. You are simply being human in the fullest sense. And perhaps this is the heart of the awakened life, to discover that enlightenment is not about escaping the world, but inhabiting it more deeply. It is not about erasing contradiction, but embracing it. It is not about choosing one side of the coin but holding the whole coin in your hand. To hold the tension of opposites is to live awake and alive in a world that is both beautiful and brutal, fleeting and eternal, ordinary and sacred. It is to discover that wholeness is not found in choosing, but in containing, and in that containment, you find a peace deeper than certainty, a joy deeper than happiness, and a love that embraces everything. Returning to wholeness, spiritual awakening, is not about becoming someone higher, holier, or more special. It is not about reaching a pedestal where suffering no longer touches you, where shadows never rise, where you live untouched by the mess of being human. No, awakening is about returning to wholeness, the wholeness you carried all along but had forgotten. Wholeness includes the light and the dark. It includes the fragile child and the resilient survivor. It includes the moments of doubt alongside the flashes of clarity. To awaken is to stop dividing yourself, to stop choosing pieces of who you are while discarding the rest. It is to finally embrace the paradox that you are both human and divine, both fleeting and eternal, both wounded and worthy. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And yet, becoming who you truly are is not simple. It requires death. The death of illusions, the death of masks, the death of identities that once defined you. These deaths are painful because each one feels like losing yourself. But in truth, each one is the shedding of what is false so that the real can be born. And here is the strange mercy. Every death is followed by a rebirth. Every collapse is followed by emergence. Each time, an old self dissolves. Something deeper, something truer takes its place. Awakening is not about surviving these deaths. It is about surrendering to them, trusting that life knows what it is doing, even when it breaks you open. I know how tempting it is to cling to old identities, to cling to others' expectations, to cling even to spiritual images of who you think you should be. But clinging keeps you from the very transformation you long for. To awaken fully is to let yourself be undone, not once, but again and again. To die daily to what is false, so that daily you may be reborn to what is real. Do not mistake this process for failure. Your breakdown is not a mistake. Your confusion is not a step backward. Your grief is not a sign you have lost the path. These are the very signs that the path is alive within you. They are proof that the old self is being stripped away, making space for something greater to emerge. I often think of it like the ocean tide. With every wave, the water rushes forward and then draws back. Sometimes it feels like you are being pulled under, swept away, lost in the undertow. But beneath the turbulence, a deeper rhythm is at work. The tide is not destroying the shore. It is reshaping it, carving it, renewing it. Awakening works the same way. The waves may undo you, but they also sculpt you into your truest form. So the question is not, how do I survive awakening? The question is, am I willing to let it transform me? Transformation means sacrifice. The sacrifice of control, of certainty, of who you thought you were. But what comes in its place is freedom. The freedom of no longer pretending. The freedom of no longer performing. The freedom of finally living as your whole self, unashamed and unhidden. Society may not understand this. The world may still want you to be the old version of yourself, the predictable one, the safe one, the agreeable one. But awakening does not give you back to society's expectations. It gives you back to yourself. And that is the true gift. If you remember only one thing from this journey, let it be. This awakening is not about becoming someone different. It is about remembering who you already are, beneath the layers of fear, conditioning, and illusion. It is about recognizing that the light and the shadow, the strength and the weakness, the sacred and the ordinary all belong. There is a profound relief in this, You no longer have to chase an image of perfection. You no longer have to pretend to be only light. You no longer have to exile the messy parts of yourself. You can breathe, soften, and allow. You can finally rest in the truth that you are enough, not because you are flawless, but because you are whole. So, do not try to survive your awakening. Survival implies clinging to the old. Let it break you. Let it unravel you. Let it take from you everything that is not truly yours. And when it does, you will discover something astonishing. What remains is not fragile. What remains is eternal. Each death will reveal more of your life. Each ending will open to a beginning. Each unraveling will free you from a mask. And in time, you will see that awakening is not something happening to you. It is something happening for you. It is life itself, calling you back to the center of who you are. So breathe deeply, walk gently, trust the process. You are not losing yourself. You are finding yourself. You are not going crazy. You are becoming sane in a world that has mistaken sleep for sanity. Awakening is not about reaching the light. It is about becoming whole enough to hold both light and dark, heaven and earth, spirit and flesh, sorrow and joy. It is about discovering that the real miracle is not escaping life, but inhabiting it fully, consciously, tenderly. And in that inhabiting, you will find what Jung called the greatest privilege to become who you truly are.